Yo, it's Austin, and as some of you know, I'm a pretty big fan of the Final Fantasy franchise. Hell, I even did a month of it last year. Now, after 10 years of waiting, Final Fantasy 15 is finally here, and I got a lot to say. As some of you know, Final Fantasy 15 has been through hell and back. First, it was announced as part of the Fabula Nova Crystallis and took place in the Final Fantasy 13 universe as Final Fantasy Versus 13, then it didn't. First, it was a Tetsuya Nomura project, then he left, leaving it to Hajime Tabata of Crisis Core and Type 0 fame. Storyline changes, characters being added, removed, rewritten, it might have even been a musical at some point. Basically, 15 has had one of the longest and messiest development cycles for a game that I've ever seen. Kinda like Duke Nukem Forever, huh? And that scared the shit out of me. You never really hear about a game going through development hell and surviving it. There are exceptions, of course, but there's always gonna be the fear that you'll end up with a Chinese democracy. So after all this time, was Final Fantasy 15 worth the wait? Have I ever told you I'm a big piece of shit? I want to answer a question right out of the gate. Is this a real Final Fantasy game? After all, it is the first in the mainline series to drop your traditional turn and stat-based combat in favor of something more action-oriented. Not to mention the whole open world day cycle thing. Well, the answer is absolutely, but there are a lot of major differences when compared to, I suppose, the Final Fantasy flavor, namely in the setup of the game. Traditionally, a Final Fantasy opens with a bang. You're attacking a Mako reactor in a resistance group. You're putting on a play for the queen in order to kidnap the princess. You're a goddamned blitzball player and everything goes to shit. 15, however, decides to open with a putter. You're quite literally stuck on the side of the road, pushing your car, the regalia, to the nearest auto repair shop. Okay, I know that sounds stupid, but in this moment where you hold R2 to push the damn car, exists a ton of character building. Vehicles are passing you on the road and everyone's bitching at each other. Some are gonna be off-put by this, but man, I don't think there was a better way to start the narrative off here. Sure, it's not throwing you into the middle of a battlefield with big monsters slinging their dicks about, but that's a good thing. Instead, we've got this mellow-ass opening with an emphasis on the core theme of this game: friendship. As for the characters, we've got 4 major ones you'll be following the entire time. There's Prompto, the goofy blonde kid, Gladiolus, the one who takes himself too seriously, Ignis, the dad of the group, and of course, Noctis, the Prince of Insomnia, son of King Regis. One glance at Noctis and you might think, oh, look at this Sasuke-looking motherfucker, but also fuck you because Noctis is way more interesting. He's actually a big nerd who enjoys being lazy, playing video games, and is like way too into fishing, but we'll come back to that. You're on the way to Altisa to meet up with Lady Luna Freya Nox Fleuret for your wedding. You can tell that the team at Square Enix here had a thing for Latin when naming all these characters, but I mean, this all comes from a game initially called Final Fantasy Versus 13. What does that even mean? Eventually shit hits the fan and suddenly we've got a lot more on our plates. As a heads up, there will be gameplay spoilers here, but I'm gonna do my best not to show anything story related that wasn't already shown in trailers. But yeah, that's our setup. It's at this point that you're thrown into this massive world for some good old-fashioned open-ended gameplay, and it feels fucking good. This is actually the one people were worried about quite a bit. Early demos and builds of the game led to the concern that things might feel incredibly sloppy. Well, I'm happy to report that it's not only vastly improved since then, but 15 is actually super fun to play. And oh god, there's so much variety here. So you only assume control of Noctis, your typical Superboy with superpowers and shit. You can warp around, change weapons with the press of a D-pad, and do crazy maneuvers in combat. And there's actually a great reliance on player skill in order to tackle situations. You can, if you're tough enough, take out monsters that are severely more powerful than you by simply learning how to take them on. The same goes for monsters weaker than you. They can fuck you up if you decide to, like, not learn how to play the game. And thankfully, it's all pretty simple. You have auto attack and auto dodge buttons, but you need to be more precise with timed hits and learning the directional combo system in order to take down the biggest beasts. It feels real fucking good! Visually, the combat relies on the fancy ass flourish that you'd see from a character action game. Nailing attacks from behind might end up in link attacks where you and a nearby party member do some fancy dancing before just fucking murdering shit. The parries you can pull off can be sometimes fucking insane. Some goddamn Metal Gear Rising bullshit. Magic is handled in a unique manner in that mana is not actually tied to it. MP is tied to your warp strikes and dodging, and magic is instead a craftable consumable. This is because they went and made the effects of using spells fucking devastating. They completely affect the environment and will cause friendly fire. Especially when you get into crafting like quad cast Aga level magic, you're gonna fuck shit up. Especially your own guys. You also will eventually unlock summons, which happen at random. This might seem slightly anti-Final Fantasy, but the impact of the summons is so crazy usually that it only makes sense. They are absolutely massive and will completely wreck the monsters you're fighting, but also the battlefield. Visually, it's like, ah! Getting a summon during a boss fight is one of the most exciting things about combat because you just get to watch the chaos ensue. You'll gain experience for doing quests, hunting, and killing monsters. There's also AP, which is used to unlock more skills and abilities for your characters, which can be gained a unique number of ways. These abilities will add a lot to each character, so it's up to you to figure out how to spend it. Oh, also, you don't collect XP in the normal manner. You actually have to stay at an inn or camp in order to accrue it. Why? Well, there's a ton of game mechanics that have gone into making this make sense. First off, nighttime. For those of you who have played Dragon's Dogma, this is the closest comparison I can draw. Shit gets fucking scary at night, dog. Especially at the beginning. In fact, Ignis won't even drive you around at night because he's like, nah, fuck that, you do it. So, by camping, you get experience points and are also introduced to each of the 4 main characters' specific abilities. These aren't tied to the growth of the characters in combat, but aid to other things instead. Gladio is the survivalist. The more you explore and run around, the better he becomes at finding items for you during combat. Ignis is a chef by obligation, and you can use this to cook meals whenever you camp out. These act as buffs for your party the next day, allowing you to really turn the tide of battle. Also, the food looks super fucking tasty, so like, I'm down. Prompto is into photography and enjoys taking pictures of everyone and sharing them at the end of the day. Even if he takes photos like this sometimes. Nocta... What are you doing, man? You get to save up to 150 of them for your personal journal, which Noctis is putting together for his wedding journal, essentially. And lastly, Noctis is way too into fishing. Like, I'd say an unhealthy amount, to the point where you can spend days at a time fishing while your party sits back begging for attention. But you know, it's real fun though. I was genuinely surprised by how relaxing and also exciting it could be. The fish you catch can be used to cook dishes with Ignis, and you have to travel on foot, which helps level up Gladio. And the entire time Prompto is taking pictures, it all works in tandem and it just feels like a group of friends hanging out. They comment on what the others are doing, they argue, they laugh, they make shitty puns and have nicknames for each other. Not only that, but they have pun-offs, like, come on!
Not all games are created equal. Yeah, laugh it up.
The attention to detail and the dynamic of the main 4 here, in my opinion, is absolutely absurd and a big positive in the story of Final Fantasy 15.
We're in the money, we're in the money.
If you can't tell, Square Enix really wanted you to like these characters, and on that front, I'd say they succeeded. But hold on, we're not done yet. This game is at its best when you're treating it like an open world game. You're given this massive world to just dick around in. You can travel it by any means you want. Walking, driving, or fucking chocobos, baby! Traversal has never been this much fun in a Final Fantasy game, and it fucking shows. While I could easily hop in the car and let Ignis auto drive me around, or hell, quick travel, I much prefer hopping on a chocobo and fucking drifting around. Drifting, man, like, come on! How does that even work?
So you think you can ride this chocobo?
You'll accept a side quest and a hunt or something and set off to go explore. Maybe find a dungeon to dig deep into along the way. Face monsters new to the franchise or some good old-fashioned Final Fantasy lore monsters. Sure, you can give yourself a plan, but exploration is the name of the game here. No, not Final Fantasy Explorers. But I'm pretty sure that this is closer to that anyway. So earlier I mentioned variety, and Final Fantasy 15 has it in fucking spades. We have the aforementioned fishing, of course, but we've also got the dungeons that you can find throughout the map. Some are necessary for story progression, and others are just there for funsies. There's a big variety, and tackling each one presents its own challenge, typically with a big-ass boss at the end. But like Final Fantasies before it, 15 also has a few minigames. Kinda like 7 with the golden saucer, or 10 with the whole blitzball thing.
I can't believe I've been traveling with an Al-Bhed, a heathen.
15 has 3 big ones. First, you have Justice Monsters 5, an RPG variation of a pinball game. This is actually also available on mobile as a free-to-play game with a plethora of other stuff to do, but simplified for 15. There's also the Totemostro and Altisa, which is a coliseum. However, instead of fighting, you'll be betting on the winners. Simple, but a fun little diversion from the rest of the gameplay, and honestly a neat way to see monster character models up close instead of just mopping the floor with them. Lastly, there's Chocobo Racing. And it's better than that PlayStation 1 game. I mean, what else do you want? Certain side quests allow you to grow crops, take photos with Prompto, explore the map with your chocobos, and meet the cast of interesting and, sometimes, uninteresting characters to interact with. Put all of that on top of the open-ended gameplay, which includes a huge variety of things already, and you got yourself one hefty-ass game. One where they might have spread themselves too thin. As much as it pains me to say this, Final Fantasy 15 has some issues, and not like just minor ones, but some glaring ones that really negatively affect the experience. Final Fantasy 15 is not a finished story. In fact, I would say that it's the patched and finagled remnants of Tetsuya Nomura's original vision. And I'm not talking about gameplay here, I actually think that's the most solid and compelling part of the experience. My only issues with that are when the camera decides to not be your friend, which for the most part wasn't an issue for me. Except in big boss fights sometimes. But despite 10 years of troubled on and off development, even the final delay 2 months before release, Final Fantasy 15 does not feel complete. The entire game is essentially separated into 2 sections. You've got the open world part of it all, which is about 2/3 of it, and the last bit is a linear train ride to the end of the story. I actually really enjoy this as a mechanic because it makes sense with how the story's being told. It's just a damned shame that huge chunks of narrative are just left out or skimmed over. Entire characters, damn well intriguing characters, will make 1 or 2 appearances and then only be mentioned by name for the rest of the game. At the very least, story missions usually feel definitive enough to not give the player a sense of dissonance in the storytelling. For the most part, you won't have that, oh, we gotta go now moment followed by 4 days of fishing. And in a game that needs to be propelled forward, that's a big bonus. But you're given so much of Prompto, Ignis, Gladiolus, and Noctis that no one else is really given the proper care. I would even venture to say that very important aspects of the main 4 are kind of skipped over, such as, why are these characters with Noctis? There's hardly any explanation for this in-game. Well, the answer exists in the anime Final Fantasy 15 Brotherhood. In fact, this hour-long OVA is something I'd call crucial to the plot of Final Fantasy 15. Same with the CG movie Kingsglaive, despite how dumb it is. I know that Square Enix wanted players to experience the entire universe of Final Fantasy 15, but not everyone's gonna be into that. I actually finished 15 before watching Kingsglaive and had a massive plot hole in my head from the game that got filled. I think they failed on making 15 a standalone game. Certain characters don't have their motivations revealed, who are important to the overarching story, and that's a damn shame because I love the main cast so very much. There's also a couple more weird nitpicks that I have, but stuff that's pretty easy to fix. It really sucks that you don't have more control over your party members. While you have an absurd amount of input over what Noctis does, the other 3 kinda just die a lot. Like all the time. Like, hey, this enemy's about to do a huge AoE attack, better run away, but Prompto is all like, yo, despite the fact that I'm using a gun and can fulfill my role at long ranges, I'm just gonna stand here and die, that okay? It would be cool to have some sort of quick withdrawal command to get your road trip boys out of shit, but instead you're left pampering them with potions and elixirs. There's also the occasional graphical glitch. Like, no one else I know had this issue, but like, I must have skipped a loading zone or something because what the fuck is going on here? Fantasy based on reality, am I right? Now here comes the weird part. Squeenix and Tabata are both aware that Final Fantasy 15 is an incomplete game. There's not only going to be a season pass, but they plan to add cutscenes. What? Yeah, that's right. Final Fantasy 15 is going to have story sequences added and changed post-release. During the linear section, there's a particular chapter that's not so great. Okay, it kinda sucks, alright? You know, and of course it's chapter fucking 13, of course. Fucking hallways. Not only are they making gameplay improvements to speed it up, but they're also going to be adding and changing certain story sequences in order to make more sense of it. They also want to add more characters to be playable in the party, add bosses, all for free. And that's strange because there are multiple parts in the game where you have a guest character for a while, which suggests that you were always going to have the ability to have them in your party in the first place. All of that is not part of the season pass I mentioned. This is stuff they're adding to the game because it wasn't finished. The story wasn't complete. Luna's brother Ravis is someone that was essentially skipped over the entire game to the point where I think he had more relevance in Kingsglaive. Plot holes, under-explaining, and just disjointed storytelling in the second half make it a bit hard to understand. When you go back and watch watch some of the older trailers for Versus and even 15, you'll notice a ton of stuff that isn't in the game whatsoever. Like, where are some of these cinematics in game? Did they chop them up, or was this promotional material only? Do I have to read every developer interview in order to get the full picture of what each character is? I think my problem here lies in the fact that I already beat the game, but when I play it after these patches, I won't be playing the same game anymore. It feels like I almost beta tested a section for them, or like the content they were releasing is episodic. Now, I wouldn't go as far as to say that this specific part of the game was terrible, but it definitely needed some work. With this and the season pass coming out that adds a ton of story-related content, it makes giving a solid opinion of this game difficult. The season pass is going to have specific episodes for Prompto, Ignis, and Gladiolus, as well as a future multiplayer mode, which if it's anything like I think it's gonna be, sounds like a Final Fantasy 15 Monster Hunter clone, and I'm so fucking down! Despite these big complaints, I still think that Final Fantasy 15 is a good game. In fact, I would probably call it my game of the year. Even with the holes in the story, the characters were designed well enough to completely suck me in. The main four were people that I cared about. Side characters like Cor, Iris, Cindy, Cid, and Aranea Highwind were those I just wanted to see more of. Oh, and they put me in the game for some reason? Even Luna, the supposed lead female of 15, hardly has any screen time, and that's a damn shame because I thought she was kick-ass in Kingsglaive. Arden Azunia was a complex character who really kept you on the edge of your seat anytime he would appear on screen. I really felt worried for Noctis and the others anytime he moseyed his way in, yet at the same time I thought he was such a compelling guy that I only wanted to know more about him. I would even venture to say that the main villain of 15 is possibly one of the most interesting and sickening villains in the franchise's history. It's always fun to hate and love a motherfucker at the same time, and they stand up there with Kefka and Seymour. It's just unfortunate that their story feels so incomplete unless you have the full picture. Because of how well the main cast interacted with each other, I couldn't help but get extremely emotional at the ending. When everything comes together, when the big moments happen, and a resolution is at hand, I felt myself becoming choked up. Yeah, I fucking cried. What you gonna do about it, bitch? Endgame has kept me engaged for even longer. As of writing this video, I finished the story at 42 hours, and I'm currently 65 hours in with no stopping in sight. I mean, you get a fucking flying car for that shit. With tons of hunts, dungeons, and super bosses to tackle, I can imagine I'll be deep in the world of Vios for a while. Oh, also that multiplayer! Ugh! I've been taking a lot of things into consideration here, and it's taken me a good amount of time to find the words to describe my experience. But ultimately, I truly believe that Final Fantasy 15 is an unfinished masterpiece. The makings of one of the best Final Fantasies are all here. Standout music by Yoko Shimomura keeps things pumping and fills the atmosphere with her unique take on orchestral arrangements, using simple piano melodies and rock instruments for tense moments. Visually, the game is absolutely stunning. Certain areas are just massive and breathtaking. The way characters' hair moves in the wind, the excruciating attention to detail for animations all feel so truly modern. Certain boss fights are so busy and huge that it's amazing they run at such a good frame rate. Other areas, not so much, but that's okay. Because the biggest thing that you can take away from Final Fantasy 15 is the human aspect. The relationships and bonds that are forged, the fact that characters get dirty and tired if you don't get enough sleep, or the small interactions you see while driving around. Hopefully, and soon, we'll be able to see more of Noctis and his friends. Normally I would end on something a little less open-ended, but like Final Fantasy 15, this review's not complete. I do plan to make a follow-up video at some point, but that could be like way down the line. But for now, let's just finish what we started. Was Final Fantasy 15 worth the 10-year wait? No, but I mean, like, fucking nothing is, but I will say that in its current shape, Final Fantasy 15 is a great game, and I think you should play it. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.